Another fly girl who thinks she can shoot? The question, laced with the casual arrogance of a man accustomed to being the most dangerous person in any room, cut through the oppressive Nevada heat. The small crowd of elite operators and defense contractors gathered around the makeshift command post offered a few nervous chuckles in response. They were directed at the source of the comment, SEAL Commander Thorne, a man carved from granite and cynicism, and at the subject of his scorn, a lone figure who had just risen from the periphery. She stood in a slightly too large flight suit, her posture economical and still, her face a mask of disciplined neutrality. She said nothing. She simply stood, her presence a quiet question mark in a world of loud exclamation points. But when General Marcus Vance, observing from the shaded command tent, saw the way her feet were planted, the subtle but perfect distribution of her weight, a flicker of something ancient and powerful sparked in his memory. He saw not a pilot, but platform. If you believe that true competence needs no introduction and that respect is earned in silence, type Kestrel below. The stage for this small drama was the sprawling, sun-scorched expanse of the Nevada Test and Training Range, a place where the future of warfare was forged in dust and fire. The air, thick with the smell of ozone, cordite, and superheated sand, was the backdrop for Project Chimera, a multi-billion-dollar demonstration of next-generation integrated combat systems. Everything had to be perfect. The satellites were in position, the data links were stable, the high-ranking observers from the Pentagon were sweating patiently in their air-conditioned tents. The only flaw in this meticulously planned event was human. The designated marksman from the Army's asymmetric warfare group, the only individual certified for this specific, high-risk live-fire test, had been abruptly grounded by a sudden and severe medical emergency. Commander Thorne, whose SEAL team was providing ground security and tactical oversight, was furious. His operational rhythm had been broken. Pacing in front of the firing line, his frustration radiated in palpable waves. "I need a real marksman," he announced to the assembled group, his voice a low growl of command. "I need someone who can thread a needle in a hurricane from a mile away. I don't need a volunteer, I need a surgeon." It was then that Captain Eva Rostova, callsign Warthog 7, rose. She didn't snap to attention or call out. She simply unfolded from her seated position against a supply crate with a fluid grace that belied the bulky flight suit. Her movement a study in conserved energy. Her silent offer hung in the air, a stark contrast to Thorne's aggressive demand. He turned, his eyes scanning past her at first, looking for a grizzled face under a boonie hat, a man with the quiet confidence of a seasoned sniper. When his gaze finally settled on her, it was with pure, unadulterated disbelief. He saw a pilot, an officer from another tribe, and a woman. In his world, a world defined by brutal physical selection and a narrow, unforgiving hierarchy of skills, his assumption was instantaneous and absolute. She was out of her element. Commander Thorne let a slow, condescending smirk spread across his face. He crossed his arms, the thick muscles of his forearms straining against the rolled sleeves of his uniform. "With all due respect, Captain," he began, the words due respect dripping with undisguised sarcasm. "This isn't about qualifying on the pistol range. This is a one-shot, cold-bore engagement on a moving, high-value target at over 1,200 meters. The platform is an M-210, a system I'm willing to bet you've never even held, let alone mastered. We're dealing with shifting thermals, a variable 10-mile-per-hour crosswind, and a target window of less than 3 seconds. This is a shot for a Tier 1 asset, not for someone who spends their day at 30,000 feet. The insult was surgical, designed to publicly humiliate her, to force her to retreat back into the anonymity from which she had emerged. The other SEALs shifted uncomfortably, their expressions a mixture of loyalty to their commander and a dawning sense of professional embarrassment. They knew the tone. It was the verbal tool of a gatekeeper, designed to weed out the unworthy. Captain Rostova did not flinch. Her gaze remained steady, not on Thorne, but on the distant target area, a shimmering patch of desert that seemed to melt into the horizon. Her expression was unreadable, a placid surface on a deep lake. Her only reply was a quiet, perfectly modulated statement of fact. "I can make the shot, Commander." Her voice was calm, devoid of anger or ego. It was the voice of a technician stating a capability, not a warrior issuing a challenge. This absolute lack of emotional reaction seemed to enrage Thorn more than any argument could have. It was a silent refutation of his authority, a denial of his power to intimidate. In the background, General Vance leaned forward in his chair. He watched Rostova, and a long dormant file in his mind began to open. He recognized that stance, that profound stillness. It was the practiced calm of someone who had faced stakes far higher than a commander's ego. He had seen it before in a different desert, a different war, in the eyes of the quietest and most lethal soldiers he had ever known. Thorn, mistaking her composure for naivety, decided to double down. He would crush her with technical specifications. The target is the primary data uplink port on a prototype reconnaissance drone, he sneered. It's a 1-inch circle. You have to sever the connection without destroying the drone's main fuselage. It's a surgical strike with a rifle. So, I'll ask you again, Captain. Are you sure you want to play with the big boys? Eva Rostova simply gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. She turned and walked towards the firing line, her boots making soft, rhythmic crunching sounds in the gravel. The collective tension of the onlookers followed her like a physical presence. The nervous laughter had long since died, replaced by a thick, expectant silence. Her every movement was now under a microscope. She approached the equipment table where the M210 enhanced sniper rifle lay in its case like a dormant predator. She didn't just grab it. Her approach was reverent, a ritual of deep and abiding respect for the tool. Her gloved fingers unfastened the latches with an unhurried precision, the clicks sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet air. She lifted the weapon, her movements betraying a profound, cellular familiarity with its weight and balance. It settled into her shoulder as if it were a natural extension of her own body. This was not the awkward first handling of an unfamiliar tool. This was a reunion. She began her pre-fire check, a silent, methodical dance of competence. Her hands moved with the unthinking grace of a master craftsman. She checked the scope mounts, ensuring they were torqued to the precise specification. She ran a finger along the barrel, feeling for any imperfection. She unseated the magazine, checked the spring tension, and then slid it back into place with a solid, definitive click. It was a language of touch and feel, a silent conversation between the operator and her instrument. From his vantage point, General Vance watched this process with an intensity that bordered on awe. He wasn't just seeing a pre-fire check. He was witnessing a specific doctrine, a set of movements and procedures taught in only one place to a handful of individuals. It was the institutional fingerprint of a program so secret, its graduates were spoken of in whispers, their operational records sealed under layers of classification. He recognized the subtle can of her head as she checked the parallax on the scope, the precise way she wiped the lens with a microfiber cloth produced from a specific pocket on her flight suit. These weren't just good habits. They were the ingrained catechism of a hidden faith, the religion of the perfect shot. Thorn watched too, his skepticism warring with a growing unease. He knew enough about marksmanship to recognize that her actions were not those of a novice. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion. She was moving with the slow, deliberate confidence of someone who had done this 10,000 times before. She then moved to the firing position, a small, prepared patch of earth. She didn't just lie down. She adjusted the bipod legs, digging them into the hard-packed dirt. She used her boot to build up a small mound of earth to support the rifle's stock, creating a rock-solid platform. She became part of the landscape, a low, stable extension of the desert floor itself. She settled behind the rifle, and for the first time, she seemed to truly merge with her surroundings. Her body became still, her breathing slowed. She closed her eyes for a moment, not in prayer, but in calculation, feeling the faint whisper of the wind on her cheek, sensing the subtle shifts in temperature coming off the shimmering ground. She was no longer just a pilot in a flight suit. She was a sensor, a living computer processing 1,000 environmental variables, preparing to solve a complex problem of physics and will. The low hum of the drone grew into a high-pitched whine as it was launched from its pneumatic catapult. It climbed rapidly into the crystalline blue of the desert sky, a silver speck against an infinite canvas. On the large monitors in the command tent, the drone's camera feed showed its perspective, a dizzying, high-speed pass along a pre-programmed route, banking and weaving to simulate evasive maneuvers. The target, the 1-inch data port, was a tiny black circle, almost invisible amidst the drone's complex composite fuselage. It was a speck on a speck, moving at over 100 miles per hour. A collective intake of breath seemed to suck the remaining air from the range. The shot was, by any rational measure, impossible. But behind the M210, Eva Rostova was the embodiment of calm. The world beyond her scope ceased to exist. The murmurs of the crowd, the oppressive heat, the weight of a dozen skeptical eyes, all of it dissolved into an irrelevant haze. Her universe shrank to the circular view through the lens, the fine lines of the reticle, and the shimmering image of the distant drone. The rifle was no longer a separate object, but a part of her, fused to her by bone and muscle and an unbreakable focus. The narrator's voice in a story like this would describe the silent symphony of her internal process. It was a cascade of near-instantaneous calculations. Windage, 10 to 12 miles per hour from the west-northwest, gusting to 15. She didn't just see the wind. She saw its texture in the dance of the mirage, the sway of a distant piece of scrub brush. Elevation, a high-angle shot requiring a precise understanding of the bullet's parabolic arc spin drift. The natural deviation of the bullet caused by its rotation, a factor that grew exponentially with distance. The Coriolis effect, the subtle, almost mystical influence of the Earth's rotation on a long-distance projectile. Her mind was a ballistic computer, running equations not with numbers, but with instinct honed by thousands of hours of practice. Her breathing became a slow, rhythmic tide, in and out, each cycle bringing her closer to a state of perfect stillness. She found the natural respiratory pause, the fleeting moment of metabolic calm between exhale and inhale. The drone entered the optimal firing window, a fleeting 3-second corridor in its flight path. Her finger began to apply pressure to the trigger, a slow, steady squeeze, so smooth that the rifle itself would not know the exact moment of its own firing. Then a single, sharp crack echoed across the valley. It was not a thunderous roar, but a crisp, definitive statement. The sound seemed to hang in the air for a moment before being swallowed by the vast emptiness of the desert. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. All eyes were fixed on the monitors. The drone continued its flight path, seemingly untouched. A low murmur of disappointment began to ripple through the crowd. Thorne allowed himself a brief, vindicated smirk. Then, the drone's lights flickered. Its telemetry feed on the main screen dissolved into a blizzard of static. The smooth hum of its engine coughed, sputtered, and died. It hung in the air for a moment, a sudden and unnatural silence where there had been motion, and then it began to fall. It wasn't an explosion, it was a clean, surgical death. It tumbled from the sky in a dead-stick landing, an inert piece of technology silenced by a single, perfectly placed piece of lead. In a command tent, an engineer zoomed in on the retrieved video feed from a chase plane. There on the screen, for all to see, was the drone's data port. A clean, perfectly round hole was punched directly through its center. The rest of the fuselage was pristine, untouched. It was a shot of impossible precision, a feat of marksmanship that defied belief. The silence that followed was absolute, a deafening void where mockery and doubt had existed moments before. Commander Thorne stood frozen, his jaw slack, his face a mask of utter, uncomprehending shock. The smirk was gone, replaced by the pale, naked awe of a man who had just witnessed a miracle. His entire worldview, his carefully constructed hierarchy of skill and strength, had been shattered by a single, silent bullet. "No," he whispered, the word barely audible. "That's not possible." Into that chasm of stunned silence, General Marcus Vance strode forward. His movements were deliberate, each step echoing with the weight of his rank and experience. He walked past the gawking contractors and wide-eyed operators, his focus solely on the still frozen Commander Thorne. He stopped directly in front of him, his shadow falling over the humbled seal. The general's voice, when it came, was not loud, but it possessed a quality of cold, hard clarity that cut through the lingering shock like a diamond blade. "Commander Thorne, he began, his tone dangerously calm. "Did you at any point bother to read the full personnel manifest for this exercise? Not just the primary list of your own team, but the full, integrated roster." Thorne, jolted from his stupor, could only stammer. "Sir, I reviewed the key operational personnel. The pilots. Their role was air support. I didn't think." Vance cut him off with a sharp, dismissive wave of his hand. His eyes, chips of blue ice, held Thorne's. "You didn't think," the general repeated, letting the words hang in the air as a damning indictment. "That is precisely the problem." He turned to his aide, a young major who was already holding a ruggedized tablet. "Major, pull up the service record for Captain Eva Rostova. The full, unredacted file. Declassify for this audience. Authorization code Vance. Omega. 7-inch." The major's fingers flew across the screen. A moment later, Captain Rostova's file appeared on the massive display monitor that had, moments before, shown the drone's demise. The assembled crowd turned as one to look. The initial information was standard. Name, Eva Rostova. Rank, Captain, United States Air Force. Current assignment, A-10 Thunderbolt II pilot, 422nd test and evaluation squadron. Then came the next line. Previous assignment, classified. It was here that General Vance began to speak again, his voice filling the role of a narrator revealing the story's central mystery. "That classified block commander," Vance said, his gaze still locked on Thorne, "is a placeholder. It represents 3 years of service with a unit that doesn't officially exist. It was a special projects division within the Asymmetric Warfare Group, a think tank of warriors tasked with solving impossible problems." He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. "Before she ever sat in the cockpit of an A-10, before she ever earned her wings, Captain Rostova was known by a different name in a very small, very quiet community. They called her Kestrel." A few of the older operators in the crowd, men from the special operations world, stiffened at the name. It was a whisper, a legend, the call sign of a ghost who had haunted the highest echelons of military marksmanship for years. Vance pointed a finger at the screen. "She wasn't just a member of that unit, Commander. She was its lead instructor. She was the chief architect of the Army's extreme long-range counter-sniping program, the very doctrine that your own snipers use. She wrote the first draft. The reveal was relentless, a series of factual blows that dismantled Thorne's arrogant assumptions piece by piece." The list of Captain Rostova's qualifications continued to scroll down the screen, an undeniable testament to a hidden life of elite service. Medals, a Distinguished Service Cross for an action that remained shrouded in black ink, a Silver Star, with 2 oak leaf clusters indicating 3 separate acts of valor, a Bronze Star with a V for Valor device. Her list of combat deployments was a string of redacted locations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other unnamed theaters of operation. The entry for confirmed kills was simply a single, chilling word: classified. The sheer, overwhelming weight of her record silenced any remaining doubt. General Vance let the information hang in the air for a long moment before delivering the final, crushing blow of irony. "That rifle you so condescendingly handed her," he said, his voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, which only made it more devastating. "The M210 Enhanced Sniper Rifle?" Captain Rostova was on the development team. She spent 6 months at Quantico with the Marine Corps War Fighting Lab, refining its ergonomics and ballistics profile. She wrote the operational and maintenance manual, the very one your armorers use. He took a step closer to Thorne, his voice now a low, intense whisper that was somehow audible to everyone on the range. "You didn't just hand a rifle to a pilot, Commander. You handed a priceless Stradivarius violin to the woman who invented the damn instrument, and then told her she didn't know how to play." Having delivered his verdict, General Vance turned away from the now pale and sweating Thorne. He walked over to where Eva Rostova was methodically cleaning the M210, her task complete, her focus already on the proper care of the weapon. She was oblivious to the drama swirling around her, her world once again reduced to the simple, professional task at hand. Vance stopped a few feet from her. He looked at her, and in that moment, he didn't see a captain in a flight suit. He saw Kestrel. He saw the quiet, lethal competence that was the true bedrock of the American military. He straightened his back, his posture becoming ramrod straight, and executed a salute. It was not the casual salute an officer gives a subordinate. It was a formal, razor-sharp gesture of profound and unequivocal respect, the kind a soldier gives to a holder of the Medal of Honor. "Captain Rostova," he said, his voice resonating with authority and sincerity. "On behalf of myself and the United States Armed Forces, my sincere apologies for my officer's complete and utter lack of professional courtesy. Thank you for your demonstration." The act was a thunderclap. A three-star general, a man who commanded entire divisions, saluting a captain. It was a public and final validation of her skill and a searing rebuke of Thorne's prejudice. Eva finished wiping down the bolt, slid it back into the rifle, and only then did she turn to the general. She returned his salute with the same crisp, economic precision she applied to everything else. "No apology necessary, General," she said, her voice even and calm. "Just doing my job." The story of what came to be known as the Kestrel shot spread through the base, and then through the entire special operations community with the speed of a desert wildfire. It was a perfect parable, possessing all the elements of a modern military legend: a quiet, unassuming hero, a loud, arrogant skeptic, an impossible challenge, and a moment of undeniable, breathtaking skill. The hushed whispers started on the range itself as soon as the demonstration concluded. The SEALs, who had smirked alongside their commander, now looked at Captain Rostova with a mixture of awe and fear. They kept their distance at first, as if she were some kind of supernatural being. Then, one by one, the team's own snipers approached her, not with bravado, but with the genuine humility of students approaching a master. They didn't ask about her A-10. They asked about her calculation of the Coriolis effect in a shifting thermal environment, about her preferred method for reading mirage. She answered their questions patiently, her explanations technical, precise, and devoid of any ego. She was a teacher again, sharing the craft she had so painstakingly perfected. The most significant transformation, however, was that of Commander Thorne. After the crowd had dispersed and the VIPs had been escorted away, he found Captain Rostova near the hangars, where she was conducting a pre-flight inspection of her A-10 Warthog with her crew chief. He approached her alone, his usual confident swagger gone, replaced by a stiff, uncertain posture. He stood for a moment, waiting for her to acknowledge him. When she finally turned her gaze from a massive GU-8 Avenger cannon to him, he looked her directly in the eye. All the arrogance had been stripped away, leaving behind something raw and genuine. "Captain Rostova," he began, the name feeling unfamiliar without the sarcastic weight he had previously given it. "I was wrong. What I said back there, it was unprofessional, ignorant, and there is no excuse for it. That was, without question, the single greatest display of marksmanship I have ever witnessed in my entire career. I am sorry." Eva Rostova listened to his apology, her expression unchanging. She simply held his gaze for a long moment, letting the weight of his confession settle. She then gave a slight nod, an acceptance that was more powerful than any long speech would have been. "Assumptions are heavy baggage, Commander," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Travel light." With that, she turned back to her aircraft, her point made, the lesson delivered. She didn't require his shame or his penance. She required only that he learn. The legend began to solidify into institutional memory. The drone, with the perfectly drilled hole in its data port, was recovered. The port itself was removed, mounted on a polished wooden plaque, and hung in the main briefing room at the Nevada test and training range. Underneath it, a small brass plate was inscribed, "Project Chimera Live Fire Test," a 1,200-meter lesson in professional competence. Firing Position 7 is hereby designated Kestrel Point. The myth of Kestrel Point became a permanent part of the cultural fabric of the high desert base. It was a story told to new arrivals, a cautionary tale for arrogant young operators who believed their particular uniform made them invincible. A grizzled Air Force Master Sergeant would point to the plaque and tell a group of young airmen about the A-10 pilot who flew a desk for a day and reminded the Navy's best that skill respects no service branch. A Marine sniper instructor, visiting for a joint exercise, would gather his students at the firing line and tell them the story as a lesson in the dangers of underestimation. The tale evolved with each telling, but the core elements remained the same. The quiet professional, the loud skeptic, and a single, perfect shot that restored a proper sense of order and respect. The story served as a powerful reminder that the most lethal person in a room is almost never the one making the most noise. Eva Rostova, for her part, remained utterly indifferent to her newfound legendary status. She went back to her job, a job she loved with a quiet passion. She was seen in the maintenance bay with her crew chief, her hands covered in hydraulic fluid, arguing about the compressor stall characteristics of the Warthog's engines. She was seen in the chow hall, sitting not with the other officers, but with the enlisted mechanics who kept her bird in the air, listening to their stories and concerns. She deflected any and all questions about the Kestrel shot. If a young pilot, emboldened by the rumors, asked her about it, she would expertly pivot the conversation back to the technical specifications of a GPS-guided bomb or the proper technique for a low-angle strafing run. Her focus was never on the past, never on the glory. It was always on the next mission, the next challenge, the next intricate problem to be solved. Her silence on the matter was not one of secrecy or false modesty. It was the natural state of a true professional whose satisfaction came from the flawless execution of her craft, not from the applause that followed. Her unassuming nature was not a lack of confidence, but the ultimate expression of it. It was the deep, unshakable calm of someone who knew, with absolute certainty, what she was capable of and felt no need to broadcast it. Several months later, Commander Thorne stood before a new class of SEAL candidates, fresh-faced and brimming with the same arrogant confidence he had once embodied. He was briefing them on the principles of joint force operations. He clicked to a slide in his presentation. It was a simple, grainy photo of the plaque from Kestrel Point. Before we talk about tactics, he said, his voice sober and measured, we're going to talk about assumptions. Let me tell you a story about a mistake I made, a mistake that taught me more than a decade of combat ever did. It's a story about an Air Force captain, an M210 rifle, and why you should never, ever judge an operator by their uniform, their gender, or their rank. Judge them by one thing, and one thing only. Their results, the lesson had come full circle. His own humiliation had become his most valuable teaching tool. A year passed. The seasons changed in the high desert, from the brutal heat of summer to the sharp, cold winds of winter. At Kestrel Point, a new joint forces exercise was underway. A group of young Marine recon operators, full of the boundless confidence of youth, were setting up their equipment. One of them, a cocky corporal, watched as a quiet, middle-aged Air Force logistics officer meticulously organized a pallet of supplies. "Look at that guy," the corporal sneered to his friend. "Bet he pushes pencils so hard he gets a splinter." Before his friend could laugh, a hand fell on the corporal's shoulder. It belonged to his gunnery sergeant, a man whose face was a roadmap of a dozen hard-fought deployments, a man who had been on the range that fateful day a year ago. The gunny's eyes were hard. "Let me tell you something, Corporal," he said, his voice a low growl. He pointed a scarred finger towards the main briefing hall, visible in the distance. "You see that building? Inside that building is a plaque. And that plaque is a reminder that around here, we don't make assumptions. We wait for the evidence." The corporal's smirk vanished, replaced by a confused silence. The lesson, born from Thorne's arrogance and Rostova's competence, had become institutionalized. It was now part of the base's immune system, a defense against the poison of prejudice. The story of Eva Rostova served as a powerful allegory for the true nature of a professional warrior. Her identity was not singular, but layered. She was both a pilot and a marksman, two disciplines that seemed disparate but were, at their core, identical. Both required an obsessive attention to detail, a mastery of complex physics, and the ability to maintain absolute calm while under immense pressure. Whether she was guiding a 30-ton attack jet through hostile fire to deliver ordnance on a precise target, or sending a 175-grain bullet through a 1-inch circle from a mile away, the essential skill was the same: the application of perfect, calculated precision. Her essence was not defined by her tool, be it a rifle or a warthog, but by the unwavering discipline of her mind. Her legacy was not that single, impossible shot. It was the subtle, profound shift in culture that followed. It was in the moment of hesitation a young officer felt before making a snap judgment. It was in a newfound respect shown between different branches of the armed forces, a recognition that excellence could be found in the most unexpected of places. Her quiet competence had created a ripple of positive change, a legacy of humility and professionalism that would endure long after the echo of her shot had faded. She had proven that true strength doesn't need to shout. It simply needs to perform. In the end, the legend of Kestrel became a story not just about a single soldier, but about an ideal. It represented the triumph of demonstrated ability over perceived status, of quiet execution over loud proclamation. It was a testament to the idea that the most valuable assets in any organization are often the ones who seek no recognition, the ones who are content to let their work speak for itself. We see Eva Rostova one last time, not on the firing range, but in her natural element. She is in the cockpit of her A-10, flying a final training sortie as the sun sets over the Nevada desert. The sky is a breathtaking canvas of orange, purple, and gold. Below her, the world is cast in long shadows. She feels the familiar, heavy vibrations of the airframe, the powerful hum of the twin engines that she knows as well as her own heartbeat. She doesn't think about Kestrel Point or Commander Thorne or the story that is now told about her in hushed, reverent tones. Her mind is on the here and now. Her airspeed, her altitude, the complex interplay of forces that keeps her magnificent machine in the sky. She feels a deep, quiet sense of satisfaction, the pure and simple joy of a job done well. Her reward was never the applause of the crowd or the grudging respect of her peers. Her reward was this moment, this perfect fusion of human and machine, this mastery of a difficult and dangerous craft. It is the silence that proves the skill. It is the calm that demonstrates the mastery. It is the result, and only the result, that silences all doubt. Her story is a powerful reminder that in a world full of noise, true worth is measured in quiet, consistent, undeniable competence. It's a call to action for anyone who has ever been underestimated, a lesson that the most powerful response to prejudice is not an argument, but the quiet, irrefutable evidence of excellence. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud prejudice and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.